being served.
This is where election denialism hits the road. This is what it looks like in real life. You can see in the video how the Maricopa supervisors, they hustle out pretty quickly. Law enforcement blocks these people who are yelling at them and jostling them. And if you're wondering what all the yelling is about, all the shouting about treasonous and you are being served, after the supervisors left, one person in the crowd laid it all out.
12 signatures, which means each individual person is personally liable for over $21 million just from this paperwork. If they don't resign within 3 days, they will be personally served with a writ of quo warranto and an opportunity, again, to rebut any one of our claims, which I'm making right now. None of them have signed an oath of office. None of them are bonded to we the people. All of them are foreign invaders acting as government. They are not our government. Therefore, we will be serving them a writ of quo warranto with a waiver of tort, and if they still do not rebut, we'll be notifying the military, and they can be hauled off, to a military tribunal, and I think we all know the penalty for treason. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be serving them with a writ of quo warranto with a waiver of tort. If they do not rebut, we'll be notifying the military, and they can be hauled off to a military tribunal. We all know the penalty for treason. Thank you very much. Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, for what it's worth, almost all of them are Republicans. They're all foreign invaders who are now liable for millions of dollars because somebody yelled, "You're being served." If they don't resign in minutes, the military will come and execute them. And however this might look to us watching it on video, for the Maricopa Board of Supervisors, having a bunch of people rush the dais where they're sitting, yelling that they're traitors and they should all be killed, is scary. Here's how the Washington Post reported it. Quote, "The scene at the February 28th meeting terrified many county employees and others who were reminded of what happened after Joe Biden won the county and with it Arizona in the 2020 presidential race. Back then, Trump supporters used baseless claims of fraud to try to pressure or scare elected leaders into changing the county's election results." After the 2020 election, you might remember this was the scene for days on end outside that county elections department when the votes were being tabulated there. Mobs of often armed Trump supporters gathering outside the building, yelling at the election workers inside. At one point, they surrounded one elections worker outside the building. The person had to be pulled out of the angry crowd by a sheriff's deputy. Arizona has been a hotbed of election denialism ever since, as epitomized by the circus of that bizarre arena audit of the 2020 election. The state's attorney general is closing in on a decision now whether to criminally charge the fake electors from Arizona who signed forged documents after the 2020 election claiming that Trump had won the state rather than Biden. Just today, a man was sentenced to 2.5 years in federal prison for making repeated death threats in 2022 against Katie Hobbs, who was then Arizona's top elections official and is now governor. The head of the U.S. Justice Department's Elections Threat Task Force had a press conference in Phoenix today after that sentencing to drive home the message that threats against election officials will not be tolerated, they will be prosecuted, and you will go to prison. Quote, "In training poll workers for this year's presidential election, the Office of Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes is preparing them for a series of worst-case scenarios, including combat, coordinating active shooter drills for election workers, sending kits to county election offices that include tourniquets to stem bleeding, devices to barricade doors, hammers to break glass windows." Arizona has been ground zero for election denial and threats and intimidation of election workers ever since the 2020 election. Things do not seem to be getting better ahead of this next election, but this time at least state officials do know a lot more about what they're up against. Joining us now is Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for having me.
Is it fair to say that things aren't better since 2020 in Arizona, and that as we head toward this next election, you're expecting to see a continuation or maybe even a worsening of some of the sorts of threats and sort of craziness that we saw in Arizona a few years ago?
Well, I think in balance, things are actually better. Our elections officials are much better trained. They're more prepared. We know what to expect for the most part. There are some new emerging wrinkles, but we've been here, we've seen that, and those pictures you showed of those armed crowds outside of the warehouse, that was my warehouse. That was my election in Maricopa County in 2020. We got through that. We got through 2022. We will get past 2024, and we will protect democracy.
Tell me some of the specifics of your planning. This is obviously a threatening environment, not just in terms of physical safety for you and your staff, but in terms of making sure the election can be carried out without being hindered by external forces.
Yeah, well, first, the background. We've lost senior election officials in 12 out of our 15 counties here in Arizona. But to shore up the load, we're making sure that everybody who is coming in, most of whom really were already in elections at the sort of the next level down positions, that they're prepared. And we're focusing on the fundamentals. But we're also adding in some augmented training, including some AI training like we had at a recent tabletop exercise. That's training that law enforcement and the military used to sort of role play, throw scenarios out there. We've also got some Tiger teams from our office that are going out to make sure that our IT security systems are locked down, that folks are well trained, and we have worked directly with the Department of Homeland Security, both at the state and federal level, and CISA to shore up all of our physical and cyber security needs. But at the end of the day, it is fundamentals, 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 and the folks who are running elections in Arizona are ready.
I know that the Justice Department had a press conference today in Arizona and Phoenix after the sentencing of a man sentenced to more than 2 years in federal prison after threatening your predecessor, who's now the governor of the state. Do you feel like the criminal law part of this, obviously threats and intimidation are always illegal, let alone violence itself. Do you feel like on the criminal law side of this that Arizona is doing a good job at prosecuting the stuff and that you have the support that you need from the federal Justice Department to do what needs to be done?
Well, I've been openly critical of the Department of Justice and the FBI for not celebrating their wins in the courtroom enough to act as a deterrent against this sort of thing. And it looks like they're coming around a little bit. The press conference today really does show that accountability matters. And it's important that we let folks know that threats or violence against elections officials, look, at the end of the day, that's domestic terrorism. Threats or violence for a political outcome is terrorism. And that's just what's happening in America today. It's inexcusable. And law enforcement at the federal and state level needs to step up, not just the investigations, but promoting the convictions that have been had so that folks understand clearly threatening election workers is not an American thing. It is criminal. Acts of violence against election workers, election officials is also criminal. And we cannot have this kind of activity and maintain the civil society that we purport to love.
It's a really interesting point about putting a spotlight and making sure that people know when these prosecutions happen and when they're successful. Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, I'm sorry that your job is the kind of job that requires a bodyguard now. I'm thankful for your service and thankful for your time tonight. Good luck.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.